We just felt it would be wonderful to have a permanent camp that was already set up and set aside for the purpose of Christian camping.
He came round to our house one Saturday afternoon it was, and he told us his whole vision and all the way that God had led him. George was youth director for Youth for Christ, and he asked us if we would be involved in his work of Youth for Christ, in helping to help young people. At the time, George and his board were inspired about establishing a Christian campsite. After he had gone, I said to Eddie how I felt, and she said she felt exactly the same. And we said, well, maybe God is speaking to us to get involved in a Christian camp.
We went to this Tauranga convention. It was a really exciting time for all of us. And while we were there, we met with a couple who were involved with a camping site in Raglan. And they said to us, would you like to come back and be leaders at this camp? And we thought, gosh, we've got 4 children. So we said, well, not sure we're great leaders, to be honest, but they encouraged us to go. So we went to Raglan Camp with our children who enjoyed this camp. But it was the setting of the camp that really spoke to us. Raglan is a beautiful place, and this camp is set right above the beach, overlooking the sea. And as we stood there, we said, this is what we think God is wanting for living, well, it wasn't named then, but for the campsite that he had laid on our hearts. And it never left us.
One of the gentlemen in our church came across this particular facility or property, and we were ecstatic about the location in terms of the view, but there was such a real problem of access. Peter moved on the principle that he wouldn't take any important steps unless there was 100% consensus. Well, they all came up to the property and they realised there were problems with the road, but these were not unsurmountable, except there was just one of our elders who felt quite definitely that this road would not be suitable for bringing people up to and taking them into a camping situation. We were at a bit of a problem really, because Peter had such a strong conviction that this was a property that God wanted us to buy. So on the strength of that, we talked it over and prayed, and we felt we should do the next obvious thing was try and see if we could put our house on the market, and if it sold, that we would be able to maybe put a deposit on the place. To our utter amazement, we had someone who wanted to buy it within 2 days. So we took that as direction and sold the place, and so signed a contract as far as the deposit of this property was concerned. And there was still one dissenting elder. So they were in a meeting till about 3 a.m. He came away thinking, okay, what do we do now? We have put down a deposit. We had no idea what was going to happen subsequently. And it was that following day that Dave and Eddie rang up to come for an appointment.
I used to go and pray quite a bit up on the hills. I'd take time off from work or go for the lunchtime and pray on top of the hills, and I found it quite inspiring. While I prayed, I felt God really put on my heart to go and see Peter Morrow. But I felt that I needed to go and talk to him and tell him our story.
At first I thought, well, we haven't told anybody else about this at all, so why go to Peter Morrow? And I just thought, well, I said, give me some time. So we prayed together for a wee while, and then you rang Peter.
Well, both of us went to see Peter, and we told him our story, and when we'd finished, he said, would you mind if I go and get my wife.
And so that's when he brought me in. He said, you have to hear what they're telling us.
We repeated it all again, and then after repeating it all, he said, well, look, would you repeat it again? I want to go and get my assistant pastor, Rassak Renshaw, and want you to repeat it all to him.
After they had told it, as they have intimated 3 times, we felt this was such a sign that God had his hand on this kind of vision and that this property was something we should pursue.
We had to get consent from the council, and one of their requirements was that we have that water. We needed 200 gallons an hour, and we only had 72. I thought, well, there must be some water here if God has called us to this place. And I rang the geology department at the university. They directed us to certain sites which we drilled, but we got nothing, and we were stumped at this point, and we didn't really know where we were going. So Roger and myself, 2 days before the hearing, we started to dig out our spring, and every time we dug it out it yielded more water. By the end of the first day we had it flowing at 120 gallons an hour. On the second day, we got it up to 180 gallons. And the next day when we went to the hearing with being able to say that we had 192 gallons an hour.
From the time we met with Anne and Peter, we would come over here together and pray on the place. To get the resource consent, we had several of our neighbours who opposed what we wanted to do. And we were actually standing on this plateau praying, and Murray walked away, and then he came back to us after some time and he said, you know, I really think you're siting the campsite in the wrong place. But Murray said, let's really be sure that you're siting it on the right place. And we all felt this is the place. And then when we got to the hearing, 3 of our neighbours withdrew their objections because it was too close to them and their houses on the left-hand side of the road.
We brought several ministries up to have a look at it, and some were very, very encouraging, but one particular was Jean Donnell. She really felt God spoke to her, and she gave a prophetic word. Just as there are natural springs in this place, so also there are hidden springs, and people will come from afar and from the nations of the earth to be refreshed, and they will go into desert places where they will refresh others. Because of that prophetic word, and because it was an expression of our heart that Jesus said he is the well of living water, it just seemed to gel with us that we'd call this place Living Springs. And really it is our desire that when people come onto the property, they do go away different, because literally they've come in contact with the well of living water, Living Springs.
Right now we're celebrating 40 years. Actually, really, this is just the beginning. And what's gone in the past is a platform for the future. And the future is really exciting for Living Springs.
As I look back over the 40 years, I am inspired. I can only say that God has done amazing things in our midst. And I can only just thank him for what he's done.
Although the 4 of us had the vision in the beginning, that vision is caught, if you like, by the staff who work here. They take ownership of the place, and we as trustees are very happy and content with what happens here, because we know that the people who are on the place at any given time through the 40 years have all had a heart for Living Springs. We want to honour Roger and Val because they were the first pioneers to come onto this land and start the camp here. and they worked very hard physically to get this place to where it is today.
This is a place that does truly refresh people. It does truly give them a lift. It does truly pick them up and give them a whole new sort of an outlook. And I think that was there right from the beginning. That was there in the dream of the founders. That was there in the things they felt in their heart. And today it's kind of still there.
I'm always amazed when, Dennis, you bring a report to us of how many people have actually passed through in just a matter of months. I think in the beginning, one of the things that you sense when God is in it, you sense an element of life welling up from within, an element of excitement and the sense of the presence of God. And I have really relished that today. And I think, God, thank you for inviting us to be part of such an amazing plan and purpose.
It's the people that come here, the people that work here, that make it what it is. And so we see where we've got to in 40 years as a platform for really something major in the future.